you say we jump
Yeah,
in?
yeah, let's get going.
Okay, well, thank you for all of those who are joining us both on Facebook and Zoom. Again, this is our webinar, Trust Sales. I'm the trustee. Now what? What do I do? So let's get into it. Today we have myself, a couple of presenters. My name is Kaleo Fong. I'm the chief negotiator for the eHara team. I deal with all of our selling clients, both on the seller's disclosure statement and holding your hand, walking you through the escrow process, dealing with the contracts from getting into escrow all the way to close. With joining us today is Miss Julie Sewin, Esquire. She is a great estate planning attorney. We actually went to law school together.
I was gonna say, aren't you an Esquire too?
I am, it's true.
We won't hold
But
that against you. We won't hold
it's
that
okay.
against
That's all I ask.
you.
But yeah, Julie, why don't you tell us a few things about yourself?
Great. Well, thanks so much for having me today. I'm very happy to be here. I graduated from law school 2007. So I'm going on 14 years of practice now. I started out in litigation. One of my main practices in the past was estate litigation. And that's what led me to doing estate planning today. It's the strife and the rivalry that I've seen that can happen when plans aren't made properly. So that's what I do, and that's what I try to. That's how I try to serve the community. So I do, I did go to school of Kaleo at UH here, and that's where I got my master's in laws.
Thanks, Julie.
Mm-hmm.
We try to do the same on the real estate side. The other presenter today is Mr. Dan Ihara, one of the top real estate agents in the state of Hawaii for the last 15 years. Dan, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Khalil. Yeah, it started in real estate in 2005, before the last recession. Business grew. My wife Julie joined me, and over the years we just kept growing and building our team. And now we have, I think, 28 of us on our team that we serve our clients at a really high level, much more than what most will be able to expect here. Mainly because we have a team concept of very specialized individuals who are trained well to execute at a high level. But yeah, so we've been in business a long time. We started doing this class mainly because we had a lot of clients coming to us and said, "Hey, I need somebody that can understand trust and how to handle them and how to deal with family disputes and things like that." And that's been something that we've been a magnet to apparently over the years, where older adults come to us and ask us for help. So we put everything that we've learned over the years, as well as working with Julie and the things that she's helped us understand, put it together in this presentation today. So we trust that it'll be of value. And if it is, please share that with your family and friends and your social media friends out there in the world. If you feel this is of value, please share that.
Thank you, Dan. All right, so let's open up a question to the audience. Again, the chat box is towards the bottom of your screen. You can open up that chat icon. Are you here to learn for yourself or a loved one? Go ahead and throw it into that chat box. We just wanted to see, what everybody is thinking, why they're joining us today. And it's another great chance to test out that chat box.
What does RS stand for? Real estate. Gary asked the question. Julie, what is that? I don't even know.
Are you asking your wife?
Student.
Yeah, my wife.
Real estate sales.
Real estate sales, RS. Thank you. I should know that, I think, right? Somebody's in the waiting room.
Anybody want to let us know? For self and for family, JD, thank you very much. That's good.
Hi,
what about you?
Nice
what
to
about
see
you, Gary? But yeah, let's let's keep moving, Dan.
Okay.
So here are the top 6 things to know as a trustee. These are the 6 items that we're going to hit through our presentation. The first is building your team of professionals. What does that mean? 2, understanding the trust. Of course, that is extremely important. What is it? Why do I need one? 3, how to protect myself from liability. 4, how do I handle sibling rivalry? 5, when should I sell? And 6, how do I get the most money from the sale?
Mm, yeah.
Perfect, perfect.
Yeah, this whole presentation came out of years and years of experience of working with families and older adults and their adult children as they're going through transition of life and after mom and dad pass away and things like that. But what we usually do when we first meet a client, when we say somebody calls us and says, mom and dad passed away, I'm the successor trustee, we ask them a number of questions, right? It's more of a discovery phase in our strategy sessions that we have with our clients. And one of the things we want to ask is, who's your attorney? Who's your estate planner, right? Who's your trust attorney? Because we might need documents, we might need their support. We just always want to know who that is in the event that we could need some help legally regarding your documents. The other is, who's your realtor? Who's advising you on what you should do with the assets that you currently have, right? And how do you analyze that, right? And how do you make those decisions? The other person is a CPA, right? Because obviously you have to understand your tax ramifications. You've now taken on another large job that, you know, we don't have any training for this, right? That's why we started this whole class, because, you know, and it's so typical that somebody calls us and says, mom and dad passed away and I'm named the successor trustee, and now what, right? And that's why the name of the class. Anyways, what we found is that there's no training for this, right? There's no one that says, here's what you need to do to take that role. And then it just organically shows up. Well, mom and dad are gone. Now you're responsible to fulfill the wishes of mom and dad via the trust document. But you've got responsibilities. So one is taxes. Right? So you want to make sure you understand the tax ramifications and liability. The other is a financial planner. What do you do with all the funds now? Now what do you do, right? And who's going to help plan for that? Should mom and dad still be around, and or if they passed on, how do you manage that? And how do you create generational wealth and creating a legacy with the assets that the grandparents have left, right? The other is insurance. We want to make sure we understand who the insurance providers are, and it could be multiple, right? It could be property insurance. It could be long-term care insurance. It could be life insurance or disability. Whatever that is, we want to know where that is, because there could be some funds in there just sitting there that you don't know how to get to, right? And so you want to make sure, obviously, as your role as a successor trustee is to manage the assets, right? And deal with them as instructed. And then also Medicaid, if that's something that would be appropriate for that individual. And I wrote that on the bottom, you know, we need a good plan and we need a good execution, because a bad execution makes a good plan look bad. We don't want to let a good
Very
plan
true.
look bad, right? So what
Very
we
true.
do in our strategy sessions is first sit down and take a look at what the options are, take a look at what you have and what your desires and goals are, hopefully plan a strategy that makes sense for you, and then we execute. Okay?
Yep. Help you build your team. Who do you have on
Yeah.
your team?
Yeah, building your team, exactly. Right.
Okay, number 2, understanding the trust. This is extremely important. What is it? What do I do? What does the trust say? You definitely want to look into it. Julie, you think you can help us through this section?
Yeah.
Um,
So, you know, in very general terms, a trust is an agreement that somebody makes with themselves that governs their assets before they become incapacitated or before they pass away. The most common known reason for setting up a trust is And when I say trust, we're referring to the most commonly used trust in estate planning, and that's the revocable living trust. And yeah, so you set that up. Most of the time, people main objective is to avoid probate. So probate is a process where if you had a will or if you died without a will, even if you become incapacitated, there has to be some court process that takes place where the court will appoint an administrator for your assets. If you didn't have a will, if you had a will, the court has to validate the will and approve the distributions. So it takes time. It takes a lot of time. And when I say a lot of time, it takes at least about a year. And it costs money. I mean, as an attorney, I can tell you one thing that's guaranteed is anytime you have somebody step foot in the courthouse, it's going to cost you some money. So
Job security?
who was that?
Was that called job security? For some. Just joking.
For some. Well, anyway, the trust instrument allows us to bypass that. If you have a properly funded trust, if, you know, say you have real estate before you pass away, or if incapacity is an issue, you know, before that even happens, the title of the asset is already inside the trust. From that point onward, the court doesn't deal with that asset anymore because it's going to be governed strictly by the provisions of your trust agreement.
Can I interject something here? Because this is a really important point. As Julie mentioned, you know, if you have a trust, if you own a piece of real estate, the real estate actually has to be in the trust for it to be protected, right? So I can have a trust, but if I buy another piece of property and I get a mortgage and I'm holding it under my wife and I buying this investment property, I still want to put that in the trust. Is that right, Julie?
Absolutely.
Yeah. We want to protect that, right? Yeah. And interestingly enough, we've seen a number of people who own real estate and they have trust and they just never put it in the trust. Right?
Yeah.
Is that common?
It's common, but it really shouldn't happen.
Right.
So when we do planning, what I endeavor to do is we always have a final meeting with the clients after all the documents are set up, where we look through the client's assets, every piece of asset, so that we know whether to designate a beneficiary on it, whether to put it in the trust or do something else, just so nothing falls through the crack. Because a trust, it doesn't do you any good unless it's properly funded by your assets. Another thing I want to point out is some people ask me, you know, I have these assets in a trust, it was passed on from my mom or dad, can I do a 1031 exchange on it? And the answer is absolutely. So regardless if that asset is funded into trust by yourself, or if it was passed on to you as a beneficiary, but it's still sitting in the trust, you can still do whatever it is that you need to do with it. Collateralize, buy, sell, and definitely can still do a 1031 exchange.
Thanks, Beth. You want to cover some of these items on the list here?
Yeah, so going back to your job as a trustee, your main job is to administer the trust. I tell my clients the most important decision you make with respect to setting up a trust is deciding who your trustees are. Because they are the people who make sure, who will ensure that whatever you put in your trust, doesn't matter how good, you know, how well it's drafted, if the trustee is not going to make sure it's administered properly as per the agreement, there's no point in setting up a trust. So if you are the successor trustee, what do you have to do next? So here I'm looking at the slide that was prepared. These are really good points. So starting with taking care of yourself and your family. A lot of trustees, they call me up immediately upon the death of the person setting up the trust. You know, I understand it's an emotional time. There's anxiety when somebody passes away. What anybody should know as a beneficiary or as a trustee is that nothing has to be done right away. So the law actually allows us 9 months from the time of death to start acting as a trustee. And yeah, so what I'm getting at is you know it's an important time that you take care of yourself, you take care of family, you ensure that the emotional and psychological aspects, as well as the well-being of those concerned, are taken care of before you try and figure out what the trust says.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then when you're ready, that's when you would seek advice. Dan, were you going to say something?
Yeah, actually, if you have a reverse mortgage, though, that window is going to be a little shorter, right? And once the passing of the person whose name is on the reverse mortgage, they have 6 months to pay that mortgage back, meaning the family could either pay the mortgage back, I mean, pay off the loan or get a loan based on that, or sell the property, right? As long as the property, if there's a listing agreement before the 6 month, we've seen mortgage companies be okay with that. So just keep that in mind. If you have a reverse mortgage, yeah, you do have a time limit on that, on selling the property. Thanks.
Great. Yeah, thanks for adding that.
We got a quick question from Jadine. How long does a trust last?
Yeah, so that is determined by the provision of the trust. Legally, there are laws that govern that, and it's tied to rules of perpetuities. In Hawaii, it's lives of beings plus 21 years. What that means is any beneficiary that is alive at the time of your death that would potentially inherit from your trust, it's the lifetime of that person plus 21 years.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's
So
so
legally, that's what's allowable, and it cannot be, you know, beyond that. But you know, when I set up trusts, I make sure that's something that I ask clients. You know, how long do you want that trust to last? Do you want it to last, you know, legally feasible, or do you want to set up a timeline? Because this is a common issue. A lot of beneficiaries come into the office and they have assets passed on by their parents and they don't want to hold it in a trust anymore. And it could be very costly to break a trust, and it's an elaborate legal process. So I do suggest to my clients that there should be a provision in there that allows the trustees to terminate a trust, given, you know, maybe it's no longer economically feasible or no longer reasonable. It just gives them that power to terminate it, because it's very expensive to terminate it after the fact. Okay, so I hope that answered the question. Yeah, okay, going back to the second point, seeking advice from professionals is important. The CPA is important. There are some tax filings that need to be made. Sometimes people miss this point. They think that because they don't have any estate taxes owing, they don't have to file an estate tax filing. That's not true. If there are assets, especially real estate assets, you should file an estate tax filing to set up the tax basis for those assets. And then Dan kind of, you know, talked about the other professionals that may be involved. So I'm gonna move on to the next bullet. Get plenty of death certificates. I would suggest at least 10. And then, you know, you would, as a trustee, try and locate all relevant documents. And of course, the most important one being the trust document. Find an attorney to sit down with you and go through that document, because it's not going to be easy to look through if you don't have that legal background. Getting an EIN number is important. Once the trustor passes away, the trust will become irrevocable and it may become a separate tax entity. That's why you need the EIN number. Trust certificate, sometimes called trust affidavit. They are the documents where if you're the trustee, you would need one to start dealing with third parties like the banks or other financial people. That's kind of your badge of, saying I am the successor trustee. So that's also important to have. It
Oh,
is, yes.
I'm sorry, question. So if I have a trust and mom and dad died and I'm the successor trustee, who helps me get this trust certificate?
The attorney can prepare one for you.
So the attorney that drafted the trust document.
That's correct.
Okay. But what if I want to make a change? Well, actually, not making a change. What if they're not allowed? What if they're dead? What if they're not here?
Oh, the attorney?
Yeah.
Oh, so you don't necessarily have to go back to the same attorney.
Okay.
Yeah, I think a simple way of looking at trust agreements, of course, it's preferable to go back to the same attorney that did your trust, but like you said, they could be dead or they could be retired. So a trust agreement is kind of like a blueprint, and the attorney in this sense is the architect. You take the blueprint to another architect, they will still understand it.
Mhm.
It's a parallel that I'm using to compare trust agreement
Thank you.
with attorneys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's one thing I wanted to point on before we go forward. You have their truster's mailing address. Talk to us about why that's important. This is
Yeah.
something small, but it could be big.
Right. So of course, when the truster passed away, the mail still goes to the truster because these people don't know that that person passed away. So there are certain people you have to notify, such as the Social Security Department, or if their employee pension plans, or if they had an employer. So make sure these people know that the truster has passed away and there's updated contact information for these people. And I'm just going to run past this slide really quick here. There is a legal obligation for trustees to notify the beneficiaries. Under Hawaii law, it's a reasonable time frame, so there isn't a set time. But of course, as soon as reasonable should be the standard. Controlling the assets. On this slide, it says control assets in the home, but basically, if you accept your role as trustee, you are responsible for all of the trust assets. So that's something we should keep in mind. Not only it's your job to protect it, to have an inventory of all of these assets, also you have to keep a clean record of these assets. So don't commingle your fund with the trustors, with the trust funds. Keep really clean paper trail, and because if you don't, you can get yourself in trouble.
Sounds like a lot of responsibility.
It
As a
is.
trustee.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Well, the law does provide that trustees are compensated. So, it's you do get something out of it. But yeah, so in choosing a trustee, you got to find someone you can rely on and somebody who can potentially take on these tasks. But, I'm saying all these things, the trustee always has the right to find help. You can hire people to do all of these things, and you should.
Yes.
If it's a lot on you, you don't want to incur any liability on on yourself. You recruit others to help you, and that and to compensate for their services, that money comes from the trust.
It sounds like you're going back to building that team, finding those experts. Rule number one.
You don't have to do it alone, and you shouldn't do it alone, because that gets people in a lot of legal troubles.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Julie. Awesome.
Oh, and the last item was the death certificate, right? I mean, time of death appraisal, excuse me.
Oh, time of death. Yes, this is important, especially for real estate. So going back to doing, an estate tax filing, you it's important because you set up the basis for that, for the assets, and time of death appraisal is exactly for that. And you know, some assets you would want to hire professional appraisers to do that task. So yeah, that's all I have to say for that. I don't know if
Yeah, my comment on that is usually, from what I'm told from CPAs and accountants, they say to us that typically the IRS is okay taking the sale price as long as it's within like 6 months of the time of death as the time of death appraisal. So the step up in cost basis, really. The whole purpose of the time of death appraisal is determine capital gains tax to the that gets transferred over or not, right? It doesn't get transferred over. It's if my mom gave me her property today at $300,000, what she bought it at, but then she gave it to me while she's alive. When I sell it at 900,000, I'm responsible for all the gain. So what most people we're going to strongly recommend is you keep it in your trust. When your mom and dad passes away, I get the stepped up cost basis of the time of death appraisal. So there's zero capital gains taxes, zero, right? And that's really the goal. But it's interesting. I've had a couple of clients that mom passed away 25 years ago and they never did one. So it's going to get a little bit more costly to do an appraisal further back in time. And it's harder to find somebody who's willing to do that. It's possible, but it's just so much easier if you just take care of it. But you know why? You know why people don't take care of it, Julie? Because they don't know, right? Most of us just, when do we need that information, right?
absolutely.
Cool. All right.
Okay. Oh, you touched on this. No trust equals probate, and we don't usually like probate, right? It's time and money.
Yeah.
Time and money. So get your trust prepared.
Yeah.
Okay. How do I protect myself from liability? Great question. Great question.
So what we did is we broke it down into general assets. Your largest assets that you own are either real estate assets or financial assets, right? And so on the real estate side, because we're in real estate, what we do on our part to do our best to help our clients protect themselves is, number one, we'll pull the preliminary title report. Well, number one is actually understanding the trust, making sure you find it and making sure you understand it. So once you find your trust, what you want to do is you want to go review it with an attorney, right? Most of our clients send it to us. We can take a look at it. A lot of them are very common, and we can kind of see who has rights to do what, basically liquidate or sell or rent the property. But yeah, the title report is another interesting document that, you know, if a home's never been sold in decades and decades, there's some things in there that may not be known, right? Things can change, and other descendants might not know they changed. We had an interesting one, right, Kaleo?
Yeah.
Family of three, and they're what, 60s, 70s. Get the property, mom and dad passed away. They got tired of going to mow the lawn and tired of going to clean up the yard and the house, and finally asked us to help them get rid of it. But we pulled the title report and we found something that was interesting, right, Kaleo, that they didn't know.
Yeah, they found that, you know, they had originally thought that the trust owned the entire property, you know, had all the interest in the property. Turns out that one of the brothers held a half interest in the property as an individual and was also a 1/3 beneficiary in the trust. So that definitely kind of shook things up for us, and just the dynamic between the family. But I think that goes back to the point where definitely you want to be aware of what's going on with title, you know, who's got what interests. We don't want to proceed under false pretenses or understandings, you know.
Yeah, no, exactly right. You can imagine three siblings, everybody thinking that mom passed away, we're going to sell the house and we're going to get 33% each, until they realize that no, they're going to get significantly less than that, except for one guy. One guy's going to get significantly more. Yeah, so probably learning that ahead of time might help with liability and family issues, disputes, that kind of thing. but yeah, we can pull that up and kind of share that with our clients. The other is
Yeah.
when you're selling a piece of property, a seller's disclosure statements, probably the most important document you're going to have to protect yourself, right? Because you're required by state law to disclose everything you know about a property. Well, oftentimes you might forget, oftentimes you might not know what to say or how to say it or how to write it, or what's important. And that's one of the things that we do. And Kaleo sits down, right? Kaleo sits down with our clients and he meets them at the house and kind of asks them a lot of questions and goes through the document. And it could frankly take hours, right, Kaleo?
Oh yeah, it's taken like 3 to 4 hours a couple times, right?
Yeah,
Because
right.
you're going over almost every type of defect or every replacement in a property. And if you've owned it for 30, 40 years, you have a very long list of items to disclose. And of course, again, it is for your protection, to protect you from any types of non-disclosure actions against you as the seller.
Yeah,
But, yeah.
absolutely. The other item is a survey. So what we do when our clients say, hey, they want to sell their house, once we come to an agreement with some documents, then we go ahead and order the survey ahead of time. And the reason we do that is typically the survey is customarily ordered 15 days prior to closing. Typically 15 days prior to closing. And the reason for that is the surveyor wants to collect their money from you. And 15 days later, you'll close and you'll get the money to pay them. So the cost comes out of the proceeds. So that's why it's usually loaded in the back of the transaction. Well, in our model, once somebody agrees to work with us, we're actually going to order the survey for you already. And the reason for that is if there's any issues with the survey, any encroachment issues, we want to resolve them ahead of time. And that's how we get ahead of the game and prevent any liability to show up late in the game, right? And it's just doing so many transactions, you learn where failure shows up, and that's one area. So we are proactive in protecting our clients in that area. And then the last area on the real estate side is really, some people are actually choosing to do pre-home inspections if they want to know what they're selling so they can communicate it and not have anybody come back at them. That's another option for people. In the area of financial assets, it's really about who's going to protect your financial assets, really your financial planner, right? We want to make sure you're not going to run out of money. Some people always want to calculate, like, how long will my money last me? And we have financial planners that can help guide them through that area. CPA, in particular for tax issues, right? You obviously want to make sure you understand your tax ramifications when selling a large asset, in particular for capital gains, because it's pretty significant. Also, how it impacts you on your personal side as well, right? And insurance, right? Understanding, like, there are a lot of clients that, funny story, actually, I'm not going to tell you what the name of the business is because you would know who it is. A friend of mine that I surf with, I met him I saw him down at the beach one day looking at the waves, and he said, oh man, my parents passed away. And he said, oh, I'm really sorry about that. And then he says, well, that's not the bad news. The bad news is they had $1 million life insurance policy each, and I can't find the policy. And I don't know where it's at. And he's a trustee. Yeah, that'd be really a bummer because your life insurance plan will pay off if you know who to call and who to let know. But if you don't, and that could be problematic. So insurance is really important. And then just the legal side, as Julie said, make sure you get some support. Don't expect to know it all, and lean into experts who can analyze these documents for you and give you good advice.
We got another question from JD. What's the pros and cons in telling the beneficiaries what is on the trust before they pass away?
Mm-hmm. I don't know if Julie, you have a different approach than me, but
You can start.
our family, so I'm the youngest of 6. There's 50 of us, I think, in total. I can't even remember who all my relatives are. I got so many of them, but no, I love them. What I'm finding to be important is just transparency. But it's not always going to be beneficial and good for all families. So I can't say that what I would choose to do in my family would be something you want to choose to do in yours. it would be appropriate based on each family member and family dynamic. But if your family is pretty close, yeah, clarity is power, right? Transparency is great, and everyone's on the same page. If you have already some history of disputes and challenges, seek legal advice. Julie, yeah, any suggestions there?
Yeah, and so I think this question is more subjective than it is objective,
Yeah.
because I go the other way. I think you know, I don't advise my clients disclosing what it is that the beneficiaries are going to get. And you know, another thing that you have to understand, at the time of your passing, you may not have the assets that you think you will have, right? You know, things change, things can happen. I don't see the value in having beneficiaries anticipating their inheritance. And most importantly, I believe, you know, it might spawn, and this is a perfect slide, it might spawn disputes before anybody knows what's really going to be there at the time of your
I
passing.
think Jadine's question is, what's the pros and cons in telling the beneficiaries what's on the trust, not so much what's in the trust.
Yeah.
So the on the trust meaning, what are the rules of the game? Who's the
Oh,
successor trustee?
let me look. Telling about what is on the trust before they pass away. So the beneficiaries don't need to know that. I really don't believe they need to know that before you pass away.
Okay, just the trust. What about the trustee?
Trustee, I think the most important thing is, you know, letting the trustee know that I want to appoint you as my trustee. Is that okay with you? Because you don't want to appoint somebody who's completely not interested in becoming a trustee, knowing that there are responsibilities, there are obligations. So, you know, the person you appoint as a trustee should also have some sense of what obligations comes along with that role. So that trustee, definitely, I think before you put your trust together, I don't proceed to preparing the trust agreement until somebody has named a trustee and we all agree that trustee wants to act and is appropriate to act, because I believe it's that important. But beneficiaries, I don't believe they need.
What if you took away the word beneficiaries and put siblings?
Yeah, again,
Same thing?
I don't believe they need to know.
Okay. Yeah. Cool.
Unless, you know, your family has some kind of arrangement that's amicable and that's to be incorporated in the trust, and, you know, and that's fine. Yeah. And so to answer even, you know, this question on the slide, how to handle sibling rivalry, is to properly plan it in your agreement.
Yeah.
This is your job as the person setting up the trust.
Right.
And of course, your attorney who will be helping you setting it down on paper. And as Dan and Khalil probably knows, you know, real estate is the asset that can spawn a lot of rivalry after the passing of mom and dad. And so there are special provisions that I incorporate in my trust agreements that can handle that. So definitely work with somebody who can help you work around that before it happens.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, perfect.
Actually, we got 15 minutes left now.
Yeah, getting towards the end. Well, when should I sell, Dan? What are the stats?
Let's just take a look at the market. You know, because what we do is we look at data and we look at trends and we look at what's going on in the world. And just taking a look back in history, you know, you look back in 1987, you know, when the median sale price was like 165 and it went up to, you know, what is that, about 380 in just a very short time period, like 3 years, right? Well, what happened after the peak of 1990? We saw a bit of a dip. Well, what happened though is more than just a dip. It stayed down and it didn't recover for 12 years. It took 2002 to get to the same values as the peak of 1990. This was the first of these two last recessions. And then what happened from 2000 and 2007 when you saw the largest creation of wealth in real estate. Your asset that you bought in 2000 every year for 7 years grew from 20 to 35% every year, one year after another. What happened after the peak of 2007? Well, after every peak, what do we expect? We see a dip. Yeah. Now, this recession was a little shorter. This was only a 7-year recession from 2007 to 2014. So it only took 7 years to recoup the values back from the peak. Okay. These are the two cycles that we've gone through, the two recessions. Well, this last rise in capital appreciation from around the, I guess it was a '09 time period, all the way up to where it is in 2019, that's a 10-year expansion. 10 years. We have never seen a 10-year expansion. Usually they're 6 to 8, but this was a 10-year expansion. So everything's going great. And then January of 2019 was the first time we saw values dip, first time in 10 years. And then we see it go up and down, but we're starting to see a trend. As you can see, what happens after the peak? Everyone knows it goes down. Yeah. That's kind of what we're going to expect to see. We're going to expect to see that. So we're saying to people, if you're thinking of selling, sooner is probably better than later. Time doesn't look to be your friend based on this data. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense, right? I mean, when in the history of Hawaii have we not had tourists show up? Never. Never. When have we ever had unemployment the way it is? Never. So what you're going to see is you're going to start seeing a larger increase in inventory over time, probably in the next 6 to 12 to 24 months. We're going to see a greater number of inventory on the market. If you're a seller, know that that's your competition. And also know that there are going to be a handful of these folks that have going to take care of the forbearance benefits of 6 months of not paying their mortgage. And then after the end of 6 months, they're going to ask, the bank's going to ask for the money, and obviously they don't have money to pay for it. They may give them another 3 to 6 months of grace, which is like handing somebody a bigger shovel, basically, in the event that person doesn't have employment, right? And I'm not saying this in joking. It's unfortunate. It's very sad to see. Know that, unfortunately, it's likely going to happen. And I feel really bad for those who are going to be in this case. Though we see what's happening around the country and we see what's happened here in Hawaii, these are trends that will likely show up. So if you're thinking of selling, time's probably not going to be your friend unless you can hold on for 10 years or more. And if you can hold on for 10 years or more, don't even consider selling because it'll continue rising over time, right? So we have some properties here. I'm not thinking of selling them only because I don't need to sell them and I'm going to ride out the appreciation because over time it will. Kind of like the stock market, right? It just recovered all of a sudden, right? Most of the people got most of their money back. Most, I say. Yeah. So that's the market in a nutshell. Any questions on the market?
I think there's a couple reasons why other reasons why you might want to sell right now. I think you were saying that the inventory is down, right? Because of this whole coronavirus, because of the pandemic, a lot of people held off from selling or getting into the real estate market. So the people that were actually selling probably had more competition because interest rates were so low, more competition for their properties, which actually drove prices a little bit up.
Yeah, right. The last, 4 or 5 listings we just brought on in the last couple of weeks, they're all in escrow and either at or above list price. Good properties go quick. There's still a high demand out there. Flip the coin a little bit. You know, there's 37% unemployment, they say, on the peak. What that means is there's 63% that still are employed. And these people have a life change. These people have children. They get married. They need a bigger house. They need a smaller house. They need to move in. They're the military. So there's activity all the time. And we're extremely busy right now, crazy busy, 7 days a week because of the activity. And so, yeah, now as Kaleo mentioned, the clients that are choosing to go on the market now don't have as much competition for properties, and the buyers are coming in and they're scooping them up. Right? So good things to happen in the market. All right.
Okay, the last of the top 6 things to know. How do I get the most of my money from the sale of the asset? Marketing strategy, pricing, and condition of the home.
Yeah, you know what the biggest challenge or biggest job really is defining the marketing strategy. Like, who's the buyer? How do you approach it? What pricing would attract the right kind of buyer? Really important to understand the market and micro markets that are out there, because you know, just looking at one little community like Kaneohe, there's like 7 or 8 different communities within Kaneohe, right? How do you know the pricing that would be appropriate? Who buys in that area? I mean, it's really important to know this information. So fortunately, you know, being old and gray hair like me, I've got a few years under my belt. So, but yeah, understanding the marketing strategy and pricing is really important, and analyzing it is really important. The last item is getting it ready, is just getting it, making it look good, right? Today's world, it's different, right? We don't have public open houses yet. We'll probably get them back soon. So we do virtual open houses. We do a lot of videos. And guess what? Everybody shops on their cell phone, right? Well, what do they look at? They're looking at pictures. Well, how good do the pictures look? Right? Well, that's the goal, is to get it in the condition so that it appeals to a broader mass and create more competition. And these are kind of examples of, they're old examples, but there's examples of some old homes that we kind of spruced it up a little, and we got the client a little bit more money, right? Painting can make a big difference. We have an entire team, a listing management team, led by our rising star, Chris Lowe. And he's one that is getting these properties ready for sale and working with the vendors and literally painting, flooring, kitchens, baths, whatever needs to be done in a home. We kind of coordinate that for you. And we provide that concierge service. Our clients do pay for the work. Obviously they pay the vendors, but you know, most people will get stuck here because they don't know what to do, how to do it, how much it costs, who to trust, right? Well, because we do this several times a week, in fact, we've got, I think, 5 or 6 projects going on now that we're renovating condos or single family homes to do. It really adds a lot of value to the property and also to the buyer, right? This was an old kit bathroom, but it's not a very old. This is Royal Summit. So Royal Summit, as you know, was the Wailaiki of the West Oahu back in the day in the 90s. A very large bathroom, but it was dated. So instead of gutting the entire bathroom, which would probably cost us $25,000 to remove it all and replace all that tile, we just glazed it and we painted it for $1,200, right? And we were able to attract the right buyer and net more money. And really that's the goal, right? When you're selling, is how do you net more money? Closing up, you know, we have a little process here, and as you can tell, we keep it really simple. Just joking. We broke it down into the pre-escrow and the escrow process, because as you're going through selling a home, you're going to have both. Before you go into escrow, when we first meet our clients, we sit down, we create a strategy session based on what your goals are, what your concerns are, what the obstacles are, and we find solutions and discuss those options. Once we come to an agreement, there's some paperwork to take care of. There's a listing agreement. We put a calendar of events together, and we shoot some coming soon photos, because we start marketing that day. Yeah. Somebody signs with us, even though we're not ready to go on the market. The board allows us to do these coming soon or sneak peek program marketings prior to even going on the market. And then we start the prep work, meaning the repairs and cleaning and staging and photos. This is what our listing management team does. And then Kaleo comes in and helps with completing the seller's disclosure statement and orders a survey for you. We'll get it way up in front of the process. And then we launch our marketing strategies. You know, we have a 5-member marketing team that produces internet marketing like you would not believe, social media marketing. Then we'll hire a professional photographer, videos and drone work. We also have agent-guided virtual tours where our professionally trained agents explain all the values of the home, and it's recorded. And then we invite all these top agents on the island to visit with us. And then we have this thing, when we do a 10-day blitz is when we have open houses. We don't have them today, but when we get back to it, we have a model that's built around driving traffic and driving values up. And it's a model that took out of a good friend of mine out of Pasadena, California, Go Bernstein, if they're listening. Yeah, that way it drives more traffic. So we have an open house, a broker's open, another open house, and then all offers are due on a certain day. And once the offers come in, then we research the buyer and the agent. This is where Kaleo really steps in and does his magic and investigation about who the buyer is, how their motivation is, and then also the lender to find out the financial abilities of the buyer. What's the confidence level we have on this person closing the transaction, or is it a risky one? So that by the time you get to review the offer, you'll have enough information to make good decisions, right? We'll never make a decision for you, though our job is to uncover as much information as possible, to do enough research, to ask the right questions so that you can make good decisions. You do a counter offer, it opens escrow, and then we get the buyer's deposit in. There's a mortgage payoff document that escrow will submit, and we'll help you with that. The seller's disclosure statement will be sent over because that's already completed. And then the buyer's going to do their home inspection. They're going to also get the survey. And the crucial standpoint, the contingency point for you, the seller, as well as the buyer, is the home inspection acceptance, right? We got to get past that in order for us to move forward. If we do, then the second deposit's due, and then the title report shows up. We send you all of these documents, the condo documents, title report, and then the conditional loan commitment letter will show up from the lender. There'll be a termite inspection, and then a final walkthrough, signing, and then you closing. So hopefully this chart has made it easier to understand the process. We tried to make it clear. There's a gazillion more steps in this. We just try to keep it simple, okay? The spreadsheets we have, it's really confusing. But anyways, questions?
Yeah, so there is a couple questions from Gary. Due to the lowest interest rates in history, your opinion, if the lower sales prices over 6 to 12 months is better to hold off on real estate purchase or better to buy now?
Good
Well, I
question.
guess yeah.
Good question. So do I believe the interest rates will stay low? That's what we're told. We don't know though, right? We have no idea. What I do know is, man, leveraging the low cost of the money is the best way to build wealth. It is the absolute best way to build wealth, is leveraging your money, and you do that through a low interest rate. Today, I think I saw, was it 3.25? You get a 15-year for 2.2 or 2.5. It's crazy how cheap the money is today. So if I found the right deal, I'd buy it. Absolutely. If it made sense for me, if I was motivated enough, I would definitely buy it. If I'm sitting on the fence and I've got some money and I'm thinking, oh, should I buy or not? Then you can be selective, right? You can be selective. Will values go down? Likely. If you're planning on buying and holding for 10 years or more, it really doesn't matter, does it? Because it's going to come back. That dip is those two cycles all eventually came back. Would you agree? It took 7 to 12 years, right? So if you're going to hold on for a while, yeah, I don't know if it really matters much, because if let's say you waited a year or 2 years, that's a year or 2 years you haven't built equity. And that's a year or 2 years that you're risking a higher interest rate environment also. We don't know for sure what's going to happen on the prices or the rates. We just have kind of indicators that kind of lead us to believe that interest rates will stay low for a little bit, at least this year, and at least until the election, I think. Yeah. But yeah, if I found the right one, I'm all over it. Yeah. Oh, okay, wrapping up. Oh yeah, we didn't even talk about this.
For upcoming webinars?
Yeah, upcoming webinars.
Oh.
Yeah, we have a number of them. For buyers, is now the time to buy on the 6th. That's Saturday, right? Saturday. And then senior living options are for those who have family members or parents or aunties and uncles who are trying to figure out, maybe it's not the right place for them to be at home. Maybe there's challenges at home. Then you want to come to this because we'll talk about if your home doesn't fit you, where could you go? How much would it cost? What does life look like? Get a better feel of what those options could be like for you. And then on the 13th, we have Building Wealth by Investing in Real Estate. We'll talk about how we help folks build wealth. And then selling in uncertain times. How do you sell real estate in the COVID times, right? We'll talk about that. And then the 5 big mistakes veterans and military homeowners make. What are those things? And we're going to share all of that on the 20th of June. And then I think there's a couple more at the end, but I think we ran out of space on the slide. So if you want to, let's see, Carrie, what is it? They follow us on Facebook. Then you'll see all of the upcoming seminars for the next couple months.
Yeah, they can follow us on Facebook, EHARA team. On Facebook. Well, actually, these recordings are, if you miss, we'd love to have you interact with us in person, but if you miss that time slot, it's always recorded, and the recording will be on our Facebook site page, as well as our website that I'll put in the chat for everyone as well. And it'll have our upcoming schedule of events so that you guys can stay in touch and know where we're going to be, and join us from the comfort of your home anytime.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Carrie.
Very good. Cool. And closing up, we have a number of organizations. I don't even think we talked about that, actually. These guys, property management firm. EHAR team is a real estate firm, obviously, for 15 years. We've actually helped over almost 1,100 families, right? Transactions. We built this thing called the Complete Solution. You see the trademark there for the United States. Because we wanted to be able to share this with other real estate agents around the country. So that's our training company. Our training company is called the Complete Solution. It's a training consulting company. We have High Property Management, where we have about 145 doors that we manage here in Hawaii. Stage Hawaii, which is our staging company run by our own Tiffany Young, our buyer's agent also. And then Senior Move Managers in Declutter Hawaii is a company we built 10 years ago. We've helped almost 800 families move from their home to another environment. And then Silver Spoons, which is our nonprofit, designed to take care of our kupuna who can't take care of themselves. And then everything that we do is run off of a simple mission. It's really to honor God by serving others with the highest level of competency, care, and compassion with uncompromising integrity. And we are done. Look at that, 101. We made it. So if you're looking for a free strategy session, if you want to talk about your situation, just put in the chat box you're interested, and then Carrie will reach out and equip that on the calendar. And then we would love to hear your feedback. We're relatively new at this game. We've been doing seminars for 15 years and this one for about 2 months. So we'd love to learn how to get better at this. So please share your feedback. And also, if you thought it was a value, please share that with your friends, social media as well. Our new upcoming webinars, you can go to our site there. And then also our virtual open houses, our virtual walkthroughs of our listings, also on our site. Do we miss anything? Oh, thanks, Gary, for putting that in.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Great webinar, guys. Julie, I do see that you put your email into the chat box. So if anybody would like to get in touch with Julie, has further questions about estate planning, feel free to reach out to her as well. Yeah. Thank you, everybody on Zoom and on Facebook for joining us today.
Sounds good, everybody. Well, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Give us a call, text, email, come to our site. Or come join us on the next webinar on Saturday.